In the first moments of creation, when matter and energy churned together without order, vast forces spilled outward and the sea of stars slowly began to form. For a long age, the universe was only heat, light, and thin dust, ruled by the gravity of countless newborn suns. Within those blazing furnaces, the first truly self-aware beings emerged. Their thoughts were not held in flesh, but shaped by lines of force, by plasma storms and electromagnetic flares bound to the stars themselves. Much later, they would be named the Gheden, the star gods, though at the beginning they were something far simpler and far hungrier. They fed without thought or malice, drawing sustenance from stellar energy, draining suns and shortening their lives by ages that would later be measured in millions of years. In time, they learned to drift, sliding along the invisible currents of the universe, leaving one dying star behind to find another. As beings of pure energy, the solid worlds forming in the darkness below held no interest for them. Planets burned too weakly, their fires too faint to satisfy even the vast hunger of these star-born entities, and so the star gods passed them by without notice. As the stars blazed on, the planets of the young galaxy cooled, and from matter itself, life slowly arose. Across uncounted ages, some of these lives climbed toward awareness, and among them appeared the first beings to master the crossing of the stars. They were reptilian people, later called the Old Ones, known most clearly through the memory of their creations. They were slow and cold-blooded, yet possessed of immense patience and deep wisdom. Their study of the cosmos raised their science to heights that would one day seem like sorcery to humanity. With calm precision, they learned to shape alternate dimensions and to practice vast feats of psychic engineering. The warp was not a place of terror to them, but a tool. Through it, they built portals that allowed instant passage between distant worlds, a sprawling network of warp gates linking their colonies together. The system was the ancestor of what would later be called the Webway, though far greater and more refined in its age. Through these passages, the Old Ones spread across the galaxy. Wherever they went, they reshaped worlds, seeding new intelligent species and crafting environments to match their designs. Some believed even Terra felt their influence long before humanity awoke, though such thoughts would later be branded heretical. Their civilization reached its height more than 60 million years ago. From their works came many of the galaxy's thinking species, including the Eldari, the Croarch, the Slann, and the Joka Arrow, while humanity's place among these designs remains uncertain. Far from these early empires, beneath the harsh and scourging star in the halo stars, another people arose. They were the Necrontyr, a humanoid species shaped by radiation and relentless solar storms. Their lives were brief, their bodies plagued by illness, and death was a constant companion. Their cities reflected this truth. Monuments were raised not for the living, but for the dead, and the living passed quickly through structures built to endure long after them. Dynasties ruled with the knowledge that their reigns would be short, and vast tombs dominated their worlds. Seeking escape from their lethal sun, the Necrontyr turned outward. Using stasis grips and slow torch ships clad in living metal, they crossed the void over millennia, spreading from system to system. Gradually, their dynasties came to rule much of the ancient galaxy, bound together by the Triarch and its silent king. During this expansion, they encountered the Old Ones. Here were beings who had mastered immortality and the warp itself, yet who refused to share these secrets. Envy took root, fed by the contrast between the Necrontyr's short lives and the ageless calm of their rivals. As their realm grew, unity frayed. Dynasties fought one another in brutal conflicts known as the Wars of Secession, threatening to tear the species apart. To restore order, the Silent King declared war upon the Old Ones, offering amnesty to all who returned to the Triarch. Thus, hatred and hope of immortality drew the Necrontyr together, and the war in heaven began. The war that followed was vast and grinding, and despite their technology, the Necrontyr could not prevail. The Old Ones moved through the webway with ease, striking where they wished, and slowly the Necrontyr were driven back to the margins of the galaxy. As defeat stretched across generations, unity failed again. Dynasties fractured, and the Triarch searched desperately for a means to save their people. It was then that the shadow of the Gheden fell upon them. Accounts differ on how contact was made. Some speak of chance discovery in dying stars, others of hatred echoing through space like a beacon. What is certain is that the Necrontyr found beings older than any corporeal life, entities born with the stars themselves and sustained by stellar energy. To speak with such diffuse minds, the Necrontyr forged bodies of living metal, necrodermis shells that gave the star gods form. Clad in these shapes, the Gheden appeared as gods of old myth, hiding their true hunger behind false loyalty. One among them, Mithidran, the Deceiver, came before the Silent King Sharek. He spoke of ancient wars and promised unity and immortality, asking no price in return. Though warned by Orkhan the astrologer, the Silent King agreed, and with that choice, the fate of his people was sealed. With new weapons and starships, the Necrontyr prepared for war once more, but the scan offered a greater gift. Flesh would be shed, disease and weakness cast aside, replaced by bodies of living metal that would never age. Great biofoundries were raised, and into them the people marched. Within those blazing chambers, flesh was stripped away and souls were devoured, while metal shells were animated by what little remained of each mind. Above, the Gheden fed on the energy released, glutted on an entire species. When Sharek emerged, he understood the truth. His body was strong and immortal, his thoughts clear, yet within him was an emptiness that could not be denied. His soul was gone, consumed by the star gods. The Necrontyr were no more. In their place stood the Necrons, undying and obedient, bound by command protocols embedded in their minds. Most felt no loss at first, caring only that they would never die. Empowered by this beast, the Gheden and their Necron Legions swept across the galaxy. The Old Ones, for all their mastery of the warp, began to fall before the cold supremacy of the physical universe. With star gods and Necrons united, the Old Ones were driven toward ruin. Suns were extinguished, planets torn apart, and even the webway was breached through living stone dolmen gates. The Necrons learned to turn their enemies' greatest strength against them. These passages were unstable, and the webway resisted intrusion, sealing off infected paths, yet they allowed the Necrons to strike deep and swiftly. Without them, the soulless Necrons would have been trapped in slow isolation. For a time, the galaxy lay under their dominion. Younger species were harvested, their lives feeding the endless hunger of the Gheden, who demanded worship and fear in equal measure. But the star gods were never content. They turned upon one another, raising worlds and devouring their own kind, until only a few remained. As this devastation spread, the Old Ones worked desperately, shaping new psychic species to wield the warp as a weapon. From these efforts arose many races, including the earliest Eldari and the Crow Ark, and the balance of the war began, slowly, to shift. Psychic species spread across the stars, their warp-born power clashing with Necron technology. For the Gheden, whose existence was bound to physical patterns alone, these energies were anathema. Their empire began to fracture. In response, the star gods sought to seal the universe from the warp itself. Great pylons were raised, stabilizing reality and weakening the Immaterium's influence. Had this work been completed, psychic power might have been undone forever. Yet the warp was already in turmoil. The pain and destruction of the war echoed within it, and the sea of souls boiled with unformed power. From this chaos arose new horrors, as ancient warp entities transformed into predators, and the realm of chaos took shape. The struggle had reshaped not only the galaxy, but the Immaterium itself, and nothing would ever be the same. As the barriers between realms weakened, warp entities forced their way into the material universe. The Old Ones unleashed new defenders, but the webway was breached and lost, its gates destroyed to slow the spread. Among the horrors that emerged were the enslavers, creatures that dominated minds and used possessed psychers to open portals of their own. Through them, invasion spread like a sickness. The Old Ones' servants fell under alien control, their last strongholds overrun by the consequences of their own creations. Beset by star gods and warp-born catastrophe alike, the Old Ones were broken. Whether they were wiped out entirely or fled beyond the galaxy is unknown. What remains is only their absence. When the war was finally won, Sharek waited. The Gheden stood triumphant but weary, and only then did the Silent King strike. The Necrons unleashed weapons that tore at reality itself. Devices so terrible that even memory of them was later erased. The star gods could not be destroyed, but they could be broken, each sundered into countless shards. These fragments were bound within tesseract labyrinths, imprisoned beyond easy reach. The cost was immense, and millions of Necrons were lost, including all of the Triarchs save Sharek himself. Yet the Necrons were free at last, masters of their own fate once more. With their enemies fallen, the Silent King saw that the time of the Necrons had passed. For now, the galaxy would be left to wither, its life consumed by enslavers until new, weaker species arose. The Eldari would inherit the stars for a time, but even they would fade. Knowing this, Sharek ordered the Necrons into a long sleep, sealing them within vast tomb worlds threaded with stasis crypts. They would rest for 60 million years. When the final command was given, the Silent King destroyed the protocols that bound his people and departed alone into the intergalactic void. The Necrons slept on, guarded by silent constructs. In the far future, they would awaken to a galaxy filled once more with life, with humanity, chaos, and ancient rivals reborn. The Necrons are patient, undying, and time remains their greatest ally. No one truly knows how many tomb worlds were sealed away when the Necrons surrendered themselves to the Great Sleep. What is certain is that many never endured to the present age. Even for a civilization of unmatched technology, to still an entire people for so long was a gamble taken in silence and darkness. For 60 million Terran years they lay waiting, motionless and voiceless, bound to the last command of the Silent King, the promise that one day the dynasties would rise again and reclaim what had been lost. As ages passed and stars lived and died, countless tomb worlds failed quietly, undone by misfortune, decay, or violence long before their time of awakening. Some worlds suffered only minor flaws, small failures in chronostats or revival chambers that delayed the moment of return. Others were less fortunate. Entire stasis crypts collapsed in chain reactions, erasing millions of dormant forms in moments of cold annihilation. Ancient enemies descended upon slumbering worlds, their defenses too weak to repel retribution, while elsewhere the galaxy itself shifted and broke planets apart without malice or intent. Over aeons, curious younger species clawed through forgotten ruins, damaging mechanisms they could never understand. Their unthinking search for knowledge caused wounds deeper than those inflicted by old foes. Thus, the Great Awakening did not arrive as a single rising moment, but as scattered stirrings across uncounted millennia, like fragments of a single mind waking from a troubled dream. Errors buried deep within circuitry meant some tomb worlds rose far too early, others far too late, and many not at all. A few stirred in time to witness the Emperor's Great Crusade. Others opened their eyes during forgotten schisms and wars of mankind's past. Even now, in the current age, billions still lie sealed in silent chambers, waiting for a summons that may never come. Awakening is never swift. A single flaw in the revivification cycle can scatter a Necron's mind, leaving identity fractured and purpose dim. For some, coherence slowly returns over decades or centuries. For others, it never does. Entire worlds are filled with shambling forms whose thoughts fled long ago, their bodies governed only by automated will. These places are known as severed worlds, feared and loathed by those who still remember themselves. Even flawless revivification does not bring clarity at once. The injustice of biotransference lingers, for not all were granted equal forms. The finest necrodermis bodies were reserved for rulers and elites, while soldiers received only what was sufficient, and the common people were left with crude shells that imprisoned their minds. Within them, faint echoes of memory persist, enough only to cause suffering without understanding. While all lie dormant, each tomb world is overseen by a master intelligence, known as the Deep Spirit or Tomb Mind. It maintains systems, defenses, and silent vigilance. As the moment of awakening approaches, more systems activate, more forms rise, and the world grows dangerously vulnerable. Vast energies spill into the void, drawing the attention of scavengers and invaders alike. At first, defense is entrusted to tireless constructs, guided by cold calculation. As threats grow, so too does the Tomb Mind's response, reviving armies in measured layers. If fortune allows, the invader is repelled before true minds awaken. Often, it is the lowest ranks that rise first, preparing the path for their betters. Gradually, the world feels less like a machine and more like a civilization remembering itself. At last, an overlord awakens, and the Tomb Mind relinquishes control. From that moment, an ancient will guides the world, and its future is shaped entirely by ambition, memory, and desire. Once an overlord has taken command, the Tomb World must find its place within the remnants of its dynasty. Many dynasties will never rise again, lost to disaster or time, yet others slowly gather their scattered holdings. One world awakens, then another, and empires erased from history begin to take shape once more. At the heart of each reborn domain lies a ground world, seat of a fire on the right, whose rule extends across lesser tomb worlds and distant holdings. These empires are shadows of what once was, yet they grow steadily, shaped by circumstance and opportunity. Where younger civilizations have spread too close, defensive protocols dig deep into ancient armories, awakening worlds already poised for war. Such tomb worlds rise swiftly, their armies ready even before their rulers fully awaken. To those who observe from afar, the actions of the Necrons appear erratic, almost without pattern. Some rulers send emissaries seeking lost relics or forgotten territories through negotiation. Others withdraw inward, rebuilding their worlds in silence, avoiding conflict while ancient hierarchies reassert themselves. Most, however, choose aggression. Raids, invasions, and merciless purges spread across the stars, carried out with methods as varied as the minds that command them. Some wars follow rigid codes of honor, while others rely on deception, piracy, and quiet assassination. At times, the violence is so complete it resembles little more than the extermination of pests. Despite this diversity, all such actions serve a single purpose: the restoration of Necron dominion over the galaxy. Yet with the Triarch long dissolved and no unifying command, there is no grand design guiding them all. Each ruler pursues their own path, shaped by ambition, fear, and memory. For some, conquest and terror are ends in themselves. For others, the search turns inward toward lost culture, hoarded resources, or the long hoped for escape from mechanical immortality. The dream of returning to living flesh weighs heavily upon many nobles, a dream that once burdened the Silent King himself. With no clear succession after his departure, ambition thrives. Doomworld rulers see chances not only to restore the past, but to surpass it. Personal power clouds intent, and the true meaning behind any campaign becomes difficult to discern. Only now, as awakenings multiply, does a pattern begin to emerge. Reports of skeletal machines rising from dead worlds accumulate, and those tasked with watching the galaxy reach a grim understanding. These scattered horrors are not isolated acts, but the early signs of a catastrophe approaching the Imperium of Man. In the current age, the Necrons are still more rumor than presence, striking without warning and vanishing before a response can form. Their attacks seem to come from nowhere, leaving devastation behind and no clear explanation. The reasons for these assaults remain largely unknown, though it is understood that these forces are only fragments of what once served the star gods. They appear across the galaxy, without regard for distance or defense, bypassing fleets and fortresses as though such obstacles do not exist. Once they walked upon Mars itself, exploring its hidden depths before Imperial agents destroyed them, an event buried beneath layers of secrecy and fear. This incident stoked dread within the Imperium, for beneath the sands of the Red Planet lies an entity long feared, and the thought of its awakening is enough to chill even the most resolute. Yet despite desperate efforts, the Imperium has never captured a Necron for study. When defeated, they simply fade from reality, taking even their fallen with them. Their technology allows them to deploy and withdraw almost instantly, returning to hidden tomb worlds beyond Imperial charts. Their damaged forms are repaired and returned to battle, making their losses seem meaningless. Only total annihilation ends a Necron forever, and such remains are rarely recovered. There are whispers, too, of infiltration. The pariahs, silent and unsettling, are said to be born of human flesh, twisted by ancient design. Some believe this corruption was seeded long before mankind ever knew the stars. Yet even these forces now appear less often, perhaps abandoned by those who once believed them useful. Among the powers of the galaxy, only the craft-world Eldari truly grasp the danger the Necrons represent. Even so, they cannot know how many tomb worlds remain hidden in the dark. After the war in heaven, they kept watch in silence, guarding worlds suspected of sheltering sleeping enemies. Some of these planets were seeded with life and settled by those who would remember their duty across generations. Others were marked upon crystalline maps, their locations preserved against the erosion of time. Yet as ages passed, the Eldari were drawn into their own tragedies, and the ancient vigil faded from memory. By the time of their great fall, the Necrons were nearly forgotten, remembered only in secret halls and guarded libraries. For the Eldari, the Necrons embody a terror deeper than death itself, a fate of soulless existence that cannot be reconciled or escaped. Still, some remembered. The Seer Council of Aleitok held fast to the old charge, recovering fragments of lost knowledge and spreading watchers across the stars, while others relearn half-forgotten strategies. Aleitok strikes directly, sabotaging tomb worlds and challenging the undying legions wherever possible. In the 41st millennium, humanity spans the stars, yet knowledge remains fractured and fleeting. Worlds fall in silence, their destruction unrecorded or misunderstood, lost within endless bureaucratic decay. There is no single memory for the Imperium, only scattered fragments drifting through ignorance and fear. Some scholars claim the first true meeting with the Necrons occurred at Sanctuary 101, unaware of countless earlier encounters erased by death or disbelief. Such certainty reflects arrogance more than truth, mistaking the limits of record for the limits of reality. Across the years that followed, patterns emerged through disaster. Entire systems were harvested and left empty, fleets destroyed without trace, and ancient ambitions stirred once more. The return of the Silent King marked a turning point, his exile broken by a greater threat, drifting in from the void. As dynasties awakened, war spread unevenly. Lords rose, worlds fell, and secret galleries beneath dead planets preserved relics and captives alike. Battles with Eldari, orcs, and Imperial forces unfolded in scattered flashes, each leaving scars deeper than the last. By the end of the century, it became clear that these were not isolated calamities, but the slow gathering of a storm that threatened the galaxy itself. As the years passed, conflicts grew stranger and more personal. Captured warriors were spared, imprisoned, and released by inscrutable command. Alliances formed briefly, only to collapse beneath ancient priorities and colder logic. Doom ships rose from beneath worlds long thought secure, tearing continents apart as they ascended. Entire planets fell into servitude, their populations reduced to tools in the rebuilding of forgotten dynasties. Some victories were brief, undone by curiosity or hubris, while others reshaped entire systems. Battles spilled across sectors, drawing in space marines, Eldari, and countless Imperial lives, often ending with silence rather than triumph. The presence of wandering overlords turned tides unexpectedly, their arrival sealing victory or erasing entire fleets. In every case, the Necrons endured, withdrawing when needed, advancing again when the moment felt right. The awakening of vast engines of war brought devastation on an unimaginable scale. Entire sectors burned as artificial worlds moved with relentless purpose, immune to all but the most desperate acts of sacrifice. When these engines finally fell, it was only through the total loss of those who opposed them, their memory preserved in stone and silence. Elsewhere, duels between ancient rulers and living champions shaped the fate of worlds, ending in humiliation rather than death. Alliances formed in desperation, even between ancient enemies when greater horrors descended from the void. Victory, when it came, was temporary and costly, leaving scars that would never fully heal. Vengeance drove crusades across the stars, yet even righteous fury could not trap an undying foe. Flagships were destroyed, oaths renewed, and doubt quietly spread among those who understood the enemy too well. Entire sectors were consumed by war as dynasties reached their intended strength. Blackouts isolated worlds, defenses collapsed, and final stands bought only moments of reprieve. Even overwhelming resistance could not halt the advance for long. When the Necrons withdrew, it was not in defeat, but in cold assessment, leaving the Imperium shattered and forced to abandon what it could no longer hold. Damnos became a symbol of failure and redemption. Decades after its fall, the Imperium returned in force, determined to erase the shame of defeat. The assault was vast, deliberate, and fraught with sacrifice. Deep beneath the surface, ancient powers stirred, and the true heart of Necron's strength was revealed. When it broke free, even Necrons fell before its wrath, until it was cast into oblivion by desperate resolve. For a time, victory belonged to the living. Tombs were collapsed, survivors returned, and the world reclaimed, yet peace proved fleeting. In a later age, the Necrons returned once more, countless and unyielding. Even united chapters could not easily turn them aside, and the war for Damnos began again, a quiet reminder that for the undying, defeat is rarely the end. Even in their time of flesh, the Necrontyr lived beneath a strict protocol, where nobles ruled with absolute authority, and every place in society was tightly defined. That order did not fade when bodies were abandoned for metal, but instead grew deeper and more complex as the Necron civilization awakened once more. Each Necron belongs to a royal dynasty, a great house that traces its roots back to the ancient empire, where loyalty was once shaped by family and tradition, and is now reinforced through conquest and programming. Though they share customs and inherited loyalties, Necron nobles are fiercely individual, rarely united in purpose beyond what is demanded by those who rule above them. Worlds may bow to the same dynasty, yet the paths they follow depend entirely on the personal aims of each overlord or lord, rather than on any shared dynastic vision. Long before the coming of the star gods, there were countless dynasties among the Necrontyr, some vast and powerful, others already fading into irrelevance. Across rebellion, god wars, civil conflict, and the long great sleep, uncounted dynasties were erased, leaving only a fraction to endure. How many remain is uncertain, known only to be many hundreds, perhaps more, and those spoken of now are simply the strongest that have come to the Imperium's attention. At the peak of every dynasty stand the Firens, sovereigns whose authority stretches across many worlds and star systems. Beneath them rule the overlords, each overseeing clusters of tomb worlds, while lower still are the lords, entrusted with single core worlds or distant fringes of dynastic space. These ranks are bound so deeply into tradition that they are shared by every dynasty, unchanged across the ages. Beyond these highest stations, titles fracture into endless variety, shaped by custom, pride, and ancient precedent. Yet within armies and fleets, order remains constant, and whenever Necrons march to war, a single commander is named Nemesor, ensuring unity even among forces that have never fought side by side before. Such rigidity allows disparate legions to move as one, a structure that once carried a warlord from battlefield command to supreme rule. Lower noble ranks bear many names, nearly identical in duty yet distinct by heritage. Some inherited from the earliest days, others invented to reward loyalty and service. As dynasties spread and fractured, titles multiplied beyond control, growing longer and more elaborate, often masking low status behind grand words. When one dynasty conquers another, protocol becomes a labyrinth of competing traditions, endured patiently by minds untroubled by time. Every ruler is attended by a royal court, a gathering of lords and cryptics bound by oath or blood, and even lesser nobles keep their own pale imitations of such circles. However hollow these courts may be, they remain vital symbols in the endless contest for status, where even a mockery of power is preferable to none at all. The size of a royal court is more than ceremony, for it defines both prestige and military authority within a dynasty. Greater courts grant greater seniority, and with it, command over ever larger hosts of warriors. Even the humblest noble still directs ranks of Necron warriors, supported by elite formations and silent guardians sworn to their protection. Beyond these forces move others who owe loyalty to no single dynasty, ancient watchers who choose their battles by judgment rather than command, and relentless destroyers drawn by the promise of endless slaughter. Scholars of forbidden sciences may also be persuaded to lend their power, while the most degenerate horrors arrive unbidden, answering only their own dark urges. As rank rises, so too does the reach of command, spreading outward through layers of courts and subordinates until authority flows across entire tomb worlds. Since even the smallest of these worlds holds many lesser nobles, an overlord may call upon vast numbers of legions when need arises, an army assembled through ancient hierarchy rather than haste. All Necrons are bound by the ancient symbol of their lost empire, the Ankh of the Triarch, a mark that endures across noble and common alike. Alongside it stand the glyphs of each royal dynasty, their designs unchanged across immeasurable ages. Nobles display these marks upon masks, cloaks, or weapons, though only the most powerful may bear the complete symbol without censure. Those of lesser rank show only fragments of their dynasty's sign, reflecting their distance from its heart of power. A rare few bear no glyph at all, either remnants of fallen dynasties or figures stripped of honor, and such absence is seen as a warning of treachery past or yet to come. The common soldiery carry no such marks, regarded as interchangeable tools rather than heirs to lineage, though faint echoes of ancient colors may still hint at allegiance. War engines, however, are treated differently, bearing dynastic glyphs as personal instruments of their masters, granted a status higher even than the warriors who march beside them. For many thinking species scattered among the stars, the Necrons are only one fear among countless others that drift through the long darkness of space. Even within the Imperium of Man, understanding of them remains faint and incomplete, known in full only to a rare few who grasp the true scale of what stirs beneath the galaxy. Necron society is shaped by strict hierarchy, and so too are their tomb worlds, each bound to a clear order of importance. At the pinnacle stand the crown worlds, ancient and proud planets from which dynasties and their surrounding realms are ruled. Long ago, these worlds were centers of immense power, sustained by tribute and resources drawn from across dynastic territory. With such wealth at their command, their rulers built stasis crypts of unmatched reliability, allowing many of their inhabitants to endure the long ages of sleep in remarkable condition. When such a world is lost, the tragedy for the Necron race is all the deeper for what was preserved. Below them lie the core worlds, planets that together form the heart of a dynasty's domain. These were ruled by kin close to the regent of the ground world, ensuring loyalty endured across many worlds, even when they differed greatly in character. Though lacking the full majesty of a crowned world, they were still powers of great consequence in ages past, and in many cases they have become so once again. At the outer edges are the fringe worlds, planets of lesser standing, often distant or poor, valued mainly for labor or as sites of punishment. Some were once core worlds of other dynasties, their status diminished after conquest or quiet absorption. There is no single pattern that defines a Necron tomb world. Each bends to the will of its ruler, and from that will flows everything from vast campaigns of war to the smallest details of form and custom. Yet all are united by a single purpose: the rebuilding of ancient dynasties and the return of the Necrons to their place of dominion over the galaxy. The worlds spoken of here are only a small fraction of those that lie scattered among the stars. Each awakened planet bears its own peculiar nature, and more stir with every passing age. Across the galaxy, countless human settlements rest unknowingly upon worlds claimed long before their species ever walked upright, unaware of the silent presence sleeping beneath them. In these times of awakening, no world can truly feel at ease. Mandragora had always been a world of consequence, a gathering point for Necron armies that once clashed along the eastern reaches of the galaxy. When the war in heaven finally fell silent, its stasis crypts were filled to their limits with warriors of exceptional quality, chosen from among the finest their dynasties could muster. Its defenses were formidable, shaped to suit a world of such standing, and they endured untouched through the long ages of the Great Sleep. When Mandragora awakened, it did so whole and unspoiled, commanding vast legions ready to answer its call. This fortune did not go unused. Its new Ferinin, Imhotep the Stormlord, moved swiftly, reactivating the Dolmen Gates and sending his forces forth to reclaim nearby core worlds that had fallen under the rule of orc warbands led by warboss Snagratooth. as the orcs were driven away or destroyed, the reclaimed worlds were awakened in turn, their armies swelling, Imhotep's growing might. Since that time, the forces of Mandragora have lingered as a constant shadow along the Imperium's eastern borders, a presence that has not diminished, but only continued to expand. Aphalia, deep within a dimensional stabilizer array, left the ground world of Gheden half drawn into a pocket dimension, visible in real space for only a few hours of each slow orbit around its star. What was once feared as a ruinous disaster soon revealed itself as an unexpected gift, for the world became almost impossible to assault. Far beneath the surface lies the Oracle Chamber, where the swollen head of an ancient alien prophet is kept alive through stasis fields and careful control of time itself. Endowed with psychic sight, the creature's thoughts are projected outward as layered holographic visions, set to show events yet to come. Yet the prophet does not yield his knowledge freely. He rages against his captivity, twisting and obscuring the visions he casts so that they mislead as often as they enlighten. In this way, truth and falsehood are forever entwined within the shadows of Gheden. Thanatos is a hollow world, and at its hidden heart rests one of the galaxy's greatest wonders, the celestial Orrery, crafted by artisans of the Orrery Dynasty long before the war in heaven. It is a lattice of hologram and living metal whose beauty alone would make it priceless. Within its intricate structure, countless points of light mark the position of every star in the galaxy. To extinguish one is to doom its real counterpart, forcing it to erupt in premature fire and erase all nearby worlds in a catastrophe far beyond human understanding. Such power cannot be used lightly, for each star destroyed unsettles the balance of the galaxy itself, unleashing chains of consequence that echo across vast ages. Restoring that balance demands patient manipulation of the Orrery over many thousands of Terran years. The royal court of Thanatos does not indulge in reckless displays. They see themselves as caretakers, tending creation with careful restraint, intervening only to prevent greater ruin. Even so, this measured approach is not respected by all. War without end rages across the empty continents and darkened skies of Thanatos, as the Orrery Dynasty fights to keep the celestial Orrery from falling into careless hands, whether alien or Necron alike. In the far reaches of the coal stars, beneath the cold light of dying suns, dwell horrors that seem torn from fevered dreams. Among them, none inspire greater dread than the bone kingdom of Drazak. This world is a haunt of the flayed ones, Necrons cursed by a sickness that drives them to crave living flesh. They roam the ruined streets, tearing at scraps of rotting meat and bone, desperate to quiet senses that no longer tell them truth from delusion. Only one stands apart from this madness. Falcol, the fallen lord, rules from a throne built of splintered bone and cured skin, his single good eye fixed upon maintaining what little order he can. Though he appears untouched by the flare virus, it is difficult to know what form of sanity would choose to dwell among such company. Duty may bind him there, or perhaps his own madness simply wears a quieter face. Valgul governs not through reason, but through provision. When the last scraps of flesh are consumed or rot beyond use, he declares a time of bounty, sending the fleets of Drazak to nearby worlds. These raids seek no wealth, only harvests of blood and gore, gathered to feed the endless hunger of the Bone Kingdom. Though named a tomb world, Trantis is little more than a fringe world, a moon bound to the larger imperial planet of Mandal. Since the Great Awakening, it has become a source of terror for the human farming and mining communities below. Raids come under cover of darkness, as night sides skim low across the land, depositing small bands of Necron warriors who strike swiftly and without mercy. Entire settlements can vanish in a single night, leaving behind only empty craters where life once endured. With communities scattered far apart, days may pass before any loss is even noticed, and help never arrives in time. As dusk falls, curfews begin, doors are sealed, and sentries stand watch, yet still the disappearances continue. Once, Trantis was meant only as a way station, a place to gather resources and pass them onward through a dolmen gate to nearby core worlds. During the long sleep, its link to the wider webway was severed, isolating it completely. Now it drowns in plunder it cannot use, yet the raids on Mandal go on without pause. In the final moments of the War in Heaven, a battle of immense scale raged above Sapanek, ground world of the Sarnek dynasty. Though the Eldari assault was ultimately driven away, the skies were left choked with the shattered remains of fleets, a tangled shroud of wraithbone and living metal. The Great Sleep followed too swiftly for the wreckage to be cleared. Sapanek entered hibernation wrapped in this drifting barrier, unchanged until the distant age when an exile returned. Thazar, who named himself the Invincible, awoke on Athanos and felt a pull he could not explain, drawing him back to his former home. Finding its people still asleep, he gained access to the Tomb World's master control, the Tomb Mind, and convinced it that he was not an outcast, but the rightful Phaeron. This lie was etched into the minds of the sleeping Necrons themselves, and so the one cast out became ruler, while those who had banished him became his servants. Under Thazar's command, Sapanek was remade into the Reave-world. The orbital wreckage provided endless material for shipbuilding, and the reprogrammed Necrons served as loyal crews. Already his fleets prowl both real space and the webway, and the galaxy moves steadily toward regret for his awakening. Electromagnetic storms once tore across the tomb world of Sargon, erasing forever the memory engrams of every Necron held within its crypts. Left without minds to guide them, their living metal bodies fell under the control of the world's Tomb Mind. Unaware that its own systems had been damaged, the artificial intelligence observed the quiet order it enforced and resolved to spread that order beyond Sargon. It sent its mindless legions, known as the Severed, to the nearby tomb world of Takarak. The invasion was swift. Takarak's defenses failed. Its sleeping Necrons were stripped of their minds and their bodies claimed. As its madness deepened, the Tomb mind began to think of itself as the Sarkoni Emperor. In time, more Doom worlds fell in the same way, and the Sarkoni Emperor extended its reach even further, using mind-shackle scarabs to bind organic beings to its will, turning them into servants no different from the severed Kratos. The nobles of the Nechthist dynasty were masters of deception, and their crown world of Mobius reflects that nature in every shadowed passage. Its crypts are bound together by hyperspace corridors that twist and rearrange themselves without pattern, forming a maze that never repeats a path. No journey through Mobius is ever the same as the last, and those who enter cannot rely on memory alone. At least one Deathwatch kill team learned this truth at great cost, lost within corridors that refuse to remain still. In ancient ages, Sidon stood at the heart of Necrontyr expansion. From its vast star docks, the first antimatter torch ships carried colonists beyond known borders, seeding distant worlds. During the War in Heaven, those same docks sent forth expeditionary forces, and every cycle of 33 solar weeks saw another great stasis ship depart, bearing a legion of immortals toward conquest. When the Great Sleep ended, Sidon awoke and continued its ancient mission without question. What its rulers did not know was that the tomb mind had been corrupted during the long ages of sleep. Records were altered or lost, and courses were no longer true. Ships now launch on random paths, sometimes into the heart of a star, sometimes into the jaws of a Tyranid fleet, and only rarely towards safe landfall. Because the Necron nobility never questioned the tomb mind, the error remains unseen, and so every 33 solar weeks, another legion departs into the vast unknown. The Necrons of Drakon awoke early in the 41st millennium, yet for nearly 500 standard years they struggled to shake the disorientation of long hibernation. During that time, their world drew the attention of tech priests from a nearby forge world, and the internal struggle for clarity became entangled with open war against the Imperium of Man. In time, the siege ended. Human forces were driven away, and Dracon's armies turned their gaze outward, searching for the other two worlds of the Tevanac dynasty. No answer ever came. The nobles assumed the ancient records no longer matched the present galaxy, unaware that the truth was harsher still. Long before Drakon awoke, a warp storm had already consumed and destroyed the missing worlds. Ignorant of this fate, the search continues, quiet and unending, beneath the spires of their solitary crown world. Deep within the hidden hearts of their tomb worlds, the Necrons have slept for more than 60 million Terran years, suspended in silence and darkness. Their awakening did not come all at once, but through scattered raiding parties, quiet signs that the undying race was stirring again. As the 41st millennium unfolded, as the star gods known as the Gheden rose once more, hungry for life energy, the Necrontyr returned with them, intent on claiming the galaxy that had moved on without them. Each tomb world was built to a vast and intricate design, conceived at the height of Necrontyr's civilization. Using principles of physics and technology long lost to every other thinking species, They carved immense subterranean vaults where their people could wait out the ages. Through their mastery of interdimensional geometry, they shaped chambers that seemed impossibly large within, holding tens of thousands in ordered stillness beneath pyramidal structures of stone and metal. Far below the surface, terrible weapons were stored and temporal stabilizers raised, preserving warriors and war engines against the erosion of time, much like an endless stasis field. When reactivation begins, it follows a rigid and inevitable sequence, as certain as the slow dying of stars. First come the canoptek scarabs and spiders, tireless machines tending to the needs of the dooms themselves. Soon after, Necron warriors rise, empty of will, spreading out across the surrounding regions to observe and record. From this gathered knowledge, the Doom World's own mind, called the Doom Mind or Deep Spirit, weighs the state of its domain. According to ancient algorithms, it brings further systems and weapons online as required. Necron overlords and lords awaken bearing encoded memories and constructed personalities shaped to embody the purpose of the world they rule and to decide how it will act. Sometimes, younger races have unknowingly built their cities atop these dormant worlds, and when such trespass is detected, the response is immediate and ruthless. These Doom Worlds have awakened the fastest, becoming hives of activity as their archives and armories open. Imperial savants have named the pattern that follows the harvest a programmed retaliation that promises destruction on a scale remembered only from the war in heaven. To Imperial observers, Necron Doom Worlds appear to lack any permanent or familiar chain of command. Their warfare unfolds instead as a continuous chain of cause and effect, where each engagement triggers a response already written into the Doom World's controlling programs. Battles, campaigns, and even entire harvests are guided by this unseen logic. This structure is known as Nodal Command, a system faintly reminiscent of the most complex Mechanicus assemblies. Within it, every element is assigned a place in a strict hierarchy. Certain nodes are granted greater freedom to decide and act, while the rest are bound to follow their autonomous directives. Necron overlords and lords serve as these nodes, each holding a hierarchical value that may change with circumstance. Imperial tech priests believe there are at least 4 levels within this system, named bronze, silver, gold, and platinum, rising in authority. Nodal Command also functions as a living network of communication, gathering intelligence and passing orders with a flow likened to ancient cogitator charts from the age of technology. When a higher level lord acts, such as one of gold priority, the response is swift and unified, with all relevant data and commands cascading down to silver and bronze lords beneath them. In moments where speed matters less than understanding, decisions spread across multiple lords, and at times even reach individual Necron warriors on the battlefield. This allows coordination when needed, yet still permits distant forces to act independently. No Platinum-level Necron Lord has yet faced the Imperium, though speculation suggests such a being would command fleets vast enough to conquer entire regions of the galaxy. A force guided at that level is believed to be almost impossible to stop. Through repeated clashes, Imperial savants have come to recognize a grim pattern in Necron warfare. As a conflict intensifies, a tomb world may withdraw its forces, only to return with an army far more powerful than before, guided by an expanded Nodal Command. The more an enemy escalates, the more overwhelming the Necron response becomes. At first, only small groups of Necron warriors and a few specialized units are released, enough to crush what seems an emerging threat. But resistance invites growth, and the Tomb World systems begin to unlock greater strength, placing more forces at the disposal of its lords. This progression continues step by step until the destructive power unleashed exceeds anything humanity has faced, even the Tyranids or the forces of chaos. Vast ranks of warriors arrive through newly awakened monoliths, while immortals and destroyers advance in relentless waves. Flayed ones and wraiths slip behind the lines, spreading terror among civilian populations and breaking morale without mercy. Many believe that even more terrible machines remain sealed within some tomb worlds, awaiting only a level of conflict not yet reached. Dead worlds found near active tomb worlds, stripped of all life, stand as silent warnings of what awaits those who push the Necrons too far. When a tomb world judges its surroundings ready, the first to awaken are the primary awakeners. Canoptic spiders, also called tomb spiders, begin opening and maintaining the stasis tombs, while their smaller counterparts, the canoptic scarabs, swarm through the interior, securing passages and sustaining defenses. Gifted with resurrection protocols, the spiders bring online the first reconnaissance forces, known collectively as raiders. These raider forces, composed of Necron warriors and scarabs, emerge with limited autonomy, scanning the surface and nearby systems for signs of other intelligent races. If they are destroyed, the tomb world either sends another force to learn what happened, or moves directly to a deeper stage of awakening if a threat is confirmed. Once sufficient data is gathered, control passes to the reserve command, led by a Necron Lord of Silver priority. This Lord may enter combat directly and then assume control of existing forces should their primary commander fall. Beyond this lies the formation of full Necron battle lines. Led by multiple bronze-level lords, these line formations consist of phalanxes of warriors carried by monoliths, supported by destroyers, immortals, and specialized cohorts. These lords act as a living command circuit, sharing data, requesting reinforcements, or escalating decisions to higher authority. At the highest level yet encountered, 3 gold-level lords form the priority command, directing strategy and unleashing the most powerful units known, including pariahs, massive war machines, aerial forces, and starships. Above even this lies the hypothesized platinum-level commander, unseen and uncertain. Some believe it may be hidden deep within a tomb world, or that the world itself may serve this role. The tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus are certain only of one thing, that this ultimate authority is not the Tegan, now broken into unwilling shards and bound by their former servants. The Necrons, long stripped of any spiritual essence, cannot touch the warp or draw upon its power. They possess no psychers and cannot travel the galaxy through the Empyrean. In some ways, this is a blessing, sparing them the dangers of a realm that so often betrays its masters, yet it leaves them vulnerable when facing enemies for whom sorcery is a natural weapon. To compensate, many tomb worlds are protected by vast, null field matrices, technologies born during the War in Heaven. These emit an unknown energy that disrupts a psyker's bond with the warp, dulling their abilities and weakening demons which flicker and falter as they struggle to remain real. Even the Tyranids are affected, their connection to the hive mind unsettled by the soulless presence of the Necrons in the fields that surround them. Such defenses are not perfect. They demand immense power and must be hidden deep within a tomb world to avoid destruction. Still, they stand as proof of the Necrons' ability to answer even the most esoteric threats with technology alone. This same knowledge led to the Necrons' unfinished great work, the construction of anti-psychic blackstone pylons on Gheden and other worlds, intended to sever real space from the warp entirely. The Great Sleep halted this ambition, though it is whispered that some active dynasties may yet wish to see it resumed. All Necrons are tall, skeletal figures formed from living metal, known as necrodermis, a substance that turns aside weapons and slowly knits itself whole after injury. Even when shattered and broken, these bodies often rise again, returning to the fight as if nothing had ended. There is a quiet unease that follows them, for when a battle turns against the Necrons, the field can empty in a single breath. Warriors standing, fallen, or locked in close combat simply vanish, taken by an unknown phase technology. Because of this sudden withdrawal, their enemies are left with nothing to study, no remains to examine, only empty ground where an army once stood. The Gheden, the Necron star gods known to the Eldari as the Ingir, are said to be the oldest thinking beings within the Milky Way galaxy. Born at the very dawn of the universe from vast energies and swirling gases, they existed as etheric entities, spreading across the surface of stars and feeding on solar fire. When a star faded, they learned to drift onward on diaphanous wings, unconcerned by the thin matter of the void. Only through the works of the Necrontyr were the Gheden able to truly touch the physical world, their consciousnesses bound into bodies of living necrodermis. In doing so, they exploited the hatred that the Necrontyr held for the Old Ones, guiding them toward the harvest of living energy that the Gheden came to crave. It was these star gods who devised the process of biotransference, drawing the minds of the Necrontyr into undying metal forms. In that moment, the Necrontyr became the Necrons, immortal yet hollow, unable to truly savor their endless existence. After the War in Heaven had ended and the Old Ones were defeated, the Necrons, led by the Silent King Sherk, turned upon their masters. The surviving Sandan were shattered into fragments, reduced to what are now called Sandan shards, and imprisoned within arcane devices known as Tesseract labyrinths. Since the Great Awakening in the mid-41 Millennium, these shards have been unleashed only in dire need, for though they are bound, the risk of their escape is never fully gone. What remains of a Gheden is only an echo of what it once was, a splinter of power enslaved to Necron Command and incapable of independent action. Should a shard rebel or its controls fail, hidden safeguards return it to its tomb to lie dormant for long Terran centuries. Even so, the Necrons are cautious, for even in bondage, a Gheden shard can bend time, scour minds, tear open dimensions, and scatter enemies with a thought. Each shard carries the pride and personality of its former whole, though its memories are incomplete. A foe might be reduced to molten ruin, or instead undone through deception or transformation, simply because such methods come more naturally to the being it once was. To destroy a shard, its necrodermis shell must be breached, releasing its essence in a blinding surge that scatters it upon the galactic winds. Confusion surrounds the true number of surviving Gheden. Rumors spread of godlike entities across the galaxy, some mistaken, some perhaps true. Even among the Eldari, records disagree, and the Imperium's understanding grows only more tangled with each discovery. Among the most dangerous are the transcendent dead, vast amalgamations of many shards bound together. Their containment requires ancient energy shackles devised by the Necron artificer Svarog and the shelter of a tesseract vault, stabilized by a canoptech sentinel that draws upon the creature's own power to hold it fast. Such beings are unleashed only when desperation leaves no other choice. Several Gheden are believed to still exist, though knowledge of them is fragmentary and uncertain. Asagorad, the Nightbringer, impressed the image of death itself upon the minds of the younger races, and was nearly destroyed during its long stasis, only to be released by accident in the 41st Millennium, stirring the Necrons from their sleep. Mifida, Ron the Deceiver, has long woven schemes, guiding events and undermining the ancient weapons once meant to destroy the star gods. Magladroth, the Void Dragon, is said to remain in stasis beneath Mars within the Noctis Labyrinthus, revered by some tech priests as the machine god itself, a being of utter mastery over the material realm. Other names are known only in whispers. Iashudra, the Endless Swarm, is acknowledged to exist, though nothing more is said. Kalagura, once a devastating force, was shattered and entombed by order of the Silent King, its fate and purpose left unexplained. Ogtriada the Arisen and Igrania the Shaper are likewise known only by name. Neadresatha, the Burning One, taught the Necrons how to breach the labyrinthine dimension, opening the way through living stone dolmen gates into the webway, a path vital to a race without psychers. Saranoga, the Outsider, driven mad after consuming its own kind through the trickery of Sigurd, was sealed within a Dyson sphere beneath the galactic plane, where Harlequin's whisper it waits to return on some distant, dark night. Among Necron lords, the Overlord stands supreme, a figure of absolute authority commanding vast legions and weapons capable of breaking worlds. He marches to war with calm certainty, having calculated countless outcomes and shaped each to his advantage. Only the rarest chance or the mightiest foe can threaten him, as blows glance aside or pass through his shifting form, while his own strikes fall with precise and merciless intent. When such a being rises to rule as a Pharaon, few can stand before him. Necron lords are the most refined of their kind, their necrodermis bodies crafted to preserve thought and awareness despite the dulling passage of ages. Where lesser Necrons became little more than obedient shells, these nobles retained enough will to command armies and shape dynasties. Clad in ancient vestments and wielding arcane staffs, they direct their warriors in utter silence, their empty eye sockets burning with cold purpose. Cryptics serve as the technologists of the Necron race, manipulating the universe through knowledge rather than the warp. What others would call sorcery is, to them, applied science, allowing them to transmute matter, bend energy, and unleash effects that defy reason. Their abilities are prized, and overlords will concede much to secure their service. Not all nobility endures with sanity intact. Some fall to the madness of the destroyers, becoming destroyer lords, beings consumed by a single purpose to erase all life. Modified for slaughter and often hovering upon anti-gravity platforms, they favor sweeping melee weapons and abandon all regal ornament. Their former peers avoid them, for no one who has truly witnessed their work has survived to speak of it. Death marks are the unseen hunters of the Necron forces, striking from nowhere with flawless precision. Marked prey rarely has time to understand what is happening, for the death marks were present all along, waiting just out of phase until the moment of execution. With a single glowing eye and arcane orbs along their spines, they move in silence, their presence often realized only at the instant of death. Triarch Praetorians exist beyond dynastic politics, bound instead to the ancient laws of Necron rule. Having remained awake through long ages of hibernation, they now return to the battlefield, descending from above on gravity packs before tearing into enemy lines with rods of covenant. Their duty is not conquest, but correction, ensuring the old edicts are obeyed. Lich Guards serve as both shield and voice for the Necron nobility. Gifted with bodies as resilient as those of lords, they protect their masters and act as trusted envoys, their minds preserved more fully than most. Armed with worsets or shielded blades, they are towering figures of silent loyalty, incapable of betrayal by design. Pariahs are forged from a grim union of Necron technology and rare human evolution. Taken from among those bearing the pariah gene, they are severed from the pariah gene. They are severed from the warp and encased in necrodermis, becoming weapons against psychers. Their presence unnerves all who draw near, and their aura alone can cripple the will of those who rely on psychic power. Flayed ones are something far worse. Once Necrontyr who retained too much of themselves and were cursed with an endless hunger for flesh. They emerge without summons, swift and terrifying, wearing the skins of their victims and striking with clawed blades that tear men apart in moments. To face them is to feel courage drain away before the fight even begins. The Doomstalker stands watch over Necron Doom worlds, a colossal centipede-like construct of living metal. Able to burrow through stone and sense prey from great distances, it is nearly indestructible, a tireless guardian that embodies the silent patience of the Necrons themselves. Beyond even these elites, some Necron constructs persist in battle regardless of the damage inflicted upon them. Limbs torn away and bodies shattered do little to slow their advance. Each segment seems drawn back to the others, crawling and reconnecting until the whole is restored. What remains is a relentless mechanical presence that refuses to stay broken, rising again and again in unending silence. Necron warriors form the backbone of the undying legions, created from the countless Necrontyr who surrendered their flesh to serve the Gheden. Their minds dulled over endless ages, they became little more than obedient shells, marching to war in vast numbers before retreating to their tombs once more. Their skeletal forms shrug off common weapons, and the Gauss flayers they carry strip enemies down to nothing, atom by atom. Above them stand the Necron Immortals, those early converts who were rewarded for their loyalty. Once the professional soldiers of the Necrontyr Empire, they retained their discipline and skill through biotransference. Their frames are stronger, their weapons deadlier, and though they show little thought beyond battle, in war they are coldly efficient, advancing without fear or hesitation. Canoptech wraiths drift through tomb corridors and battlefields alike, serpentine forms held aloft by anti-gravity fields. With bladed limbs and leering skull faces, they strike swiftly, phasing parts of their bodies to evade blows or bypass armor entirely. Their ability to pass through solid matter has earned them a name whispered with dread by Imperial forces. Destroyers are something altogether different. Necrons consumed by an obsession to exterminate life. Altered immortals fused to skimming platforms. They race across the battlefield as mobile engines of death. Armed with Gauss cannons, they cut down infantry and tear into light vehicles, their speed rivaling that of Eldari jet bikes as they pursue their endless harvest. Canoptech spiders loom over the battlefield as vast floating constructs, their rounded bodies housing the systems that create and maintain lesser machines. With many limbs and cold, compound sensors, they resemble immense metal arachnids. Their fabricator claws mend damaged systems even as they rend enemies apart. And when the Necrons rise to war, these spiders advance alongside them, repairing wounds that even necrodermis alone cannot mend. Though often encountered on land, the Necrons also command fleets that slip unseen through space. Imperial records and alien accounts speak of encounters with vessels that appear without warning, guided by phase technology that allows travel without reliance on the warp. These ships move with impossible speed, seemingly free of mass or inertia, slowing only as they reach the battlefield. Clad in living necrodermis and capable of self-repair, Necron void ships are difficult to detect and harder still to destroy. Their weapons strike with uncanny accuracy, bypassing defenses thought secure. When pressed by superior numbers, these fleets withdraw as suddenly as they arrive, phasing away and leaving devastation behind. Yet their appearances grow more frequent, and the thought of a full Necron armada remains a quiet dread shared by all who sail the stars. Necrodermis is remembered as a Xenos material, shaped millions of years ago by the Necrontyr, and often spoken of as living metal. Its name carries the meaning of corpse skin, drawn from ancient Greek words for death and flesh, a quiet hint at what it would one day become. In its earliest use, this material formed the vast sublight starships that carried the Necrontyr across the Milky Way galaxy, allowing them to explore and settle the stars long before the present age. Over time, Necrodermis was adapted again, reshaped into the mechanical bodies claimed by the Gheden, and later inhabited by the Necrontyr themselves when they surrendered their brief organic lives and were remade as the undying Necrons. The substance has no known origin and no understood chemical or molecular structure. What is known is how it behaves, flowing back together as though liquid, closing bullet wounds, sealing deep cuts, and drawing severed pieces back into place with little pause. Given time, it seems to learn from harm, repairing itself even after devastation so complete that it is broken down to its smallest parts. Necrodermis forms not only the bodies of the Gheden and the Necrons, but also their vehicles and starships, from towering monoliths to distant Gauss pylons. Even the Imperium's Gheden phase weapons are fashioned from it. It is not an alloy, not a blend of known metals, but something entirely new, created by the Necrontyr and remembered for its astonishing resilience, its quiet ability to endure, absorb destruction, and slowly become whole once more. The memory lingers like a long echo, stretching from the first light of the stars to the quiet of sealed tombs. What began as hunger drifting through newborn suns became empires, wars, and choices that could never be undone. Beings of energy learned desire, beings of flesh learned envy, and in between them, a galaxy was shaped by conflict that scarred both matter and the unseen depths beyond it. The old ones rose with patience and vision, and fell beneath the weight of powers they awakened but could not fully master. The Necrontyr sought escape from suffering, and in doing so, surrendered everything that once made them whole. The star gods fed, ruled, and were broken, yet even shattered, they left their mark upon reality itself. And so the galaxy moved on. Life was extinguished, reborn, and reshaped, while silent armies slept beneath dead worlds, waiting without dreaming. Ages passed, civilizations rose unaware of what lay below, and the echoes of that ancient war faded into myth. Yet nothing here was truly finished. Time did not erase these events, it only buried them. And in the deep stillness of the long sleep, the promise remained, patient and unyielding, that what once ruled the stars would one day rise again, unchanged by time and ready to remember.